Welcome to Care to Lead, your path to leadership success. Brought to you by the Vizient Nurse Executives Network.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Barbara Seymour, Associate Vice President of Member Connections at Vizient, and I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Rebecca Love, Chief Clinical Officer at IntelyCare. She also volunteers her time as President of the Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders, also known as SONSIEL. It's a nonprofit that's recognized by the United Nations as an affiliate member to the UN. Throughout her career, she has focused on empowering nurses and creating communities to help nurses innovate and start businesses. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me here, Barbara. It is an honor.
Rebecca, you've had a bit of an unusual career. Tell me about your current position and how your career evolved from the traditional nursing role to where it is today.
You know, I think for all of us as nurses that have sort of walked the life outside of the bedside, it does feel unusual. And I think the reality of where my career started was when I stepped into nursing, I experienced so many things that didn't work well for us at the bedside and really felt like I had an inability to change them. There was always those burning moments of everything that we had to deal with on a task by task basis. And we were never able to get out of the fire high enough to actually try to change strategic direction to say, you know, if we did these things differently, we could potentially eliminate a lot of these fires that we're dealing with at the bedside daily. As a bedside nurse, I often felt like when we would bring these issues forward, there wasn't a place for us to be heard. So my career sort of took a turn after attending a hackathon that allowed me to really innovate around the space of the problems we were seeing on the front line and led us down to the ability to drive forward a new initiative nursing around innovation and entrepreneurship that we sort of started to build at Northeastern University to drive nurses into taking ownership of the problems that they were seeing at the bedside and transforming them into solutions. I also at the time had started a small company, learned how to exit that, combined with helping other nurses see how they could innovate to solve solutions, really introduced me to the business side of healthcare that stepped me forward into crossing over from the bedside into academia, that then brought me forward into the business corporate side to drive solutions forward at a more strategic level, looking at the whole workforce as opposed to just incremental moments in time and problems that needed to be solved at that level.
You know, Rebecca, I love hearing that. And those are things that we experience as we start our careers, but we're never taught in our schools of nursing or the importance about thinking outside of the box and really innovating. Why is it important for nurses to be innovative and expand beyond those traditional nursing roles?
Barbara, I'm glad you said that too about nursing school. And as a fellow nurse, I think with you even having a very different career also in nursing than our typical trajectory, I think that the reason that we need nurses now more so than ever to innovate and think differently is because something that fundamentally I think is missing from the larger conversation in healthcare today is that the reason patients go to hospitals, the reason that they have to be in nursing homes is because they need nursing care. And what I mean by that is almost every other delivery of care, physician-based care, surgery, OT, PT, respiratory therapy, all of that could be done in an outpatient setting. And the reason that patients need nursing care is because it is so fundamental to keeping patients alive. Hospitals had to double down to bring in nurses to keep these patients alive. Nursing homes exist because their lives are so unstable that they need 24/7 monitoring by nurses to keep them in their best state of health. And I think that we've seen nurses in this niche that, you know, they're so fundamental to being at the bedside, to keeping patients alive, that somehow they have been disconnected from the importance of leadership positions to actually create better healthcare systems because we see their role as being that absolute linchpin between the patient, life, death, and the system. And what we've done in this process is we've kept nurses sort of at the base of this pyramid. And at being at the base of this pyramid, we've created a hierarchy of overseeing administrators and roles that seem to sit there and say, okay, we've had the nurses there, we're going to operationalize everything else. But what we failed to do is recognize that the nurses at the bedside are facing extraordinary pressures and problems and things that we don't even see as leaders. And because we don't see them, we're burning out this workforce because we're not giving them the opportunity to solve the problems and be heard in a way that will make their work-life balance, environments better and sustainable in a constantly changing, complex healthcare environment. So I think the importance of allowing nurses to innovate addresses the problems that they're seeing at the bedside and gives them real solutions to problems that they need solved. But true innovation helps teach nurses those leadership skills that we never get in nursing school. It allows us to identify a problem, create a solution, and then understand the levers of which we need to pull to have that adopted on the business side, because in the long run, business of healthcare is a financial model that we need to be able to speak to operations and strategy and finance. And this experience of innovating and identifying problem solution fit allows for nurses to learn those skill sets that translates beyond the bedside and allows us to create a leadership workforce that integrates across the entire hierarchy of healthcare to create better outcomes, not only for the workforce of nursing, but for ultimately all patients which are in those systems. And I think the last point that I'll leave that is that I've never, ever once witnessed a nurse who has innovated to solve a problem with the idea that it was going to make them money. Nurses innovate because they want to alleviate the human suffering that they're seeing in front of them, or change an environment that is burning out their colleagues and leading to worse outcomes for patients. So the truth is if we created pathways and more opportunities for nurses to innovate, not only would it change the way nurses feel heard and seen in their systems, but ultimately it will deliver better care and outcomes for patients in a way we yet have not been able to recognize because we have left nurses out of those conversations. And that is the power. And I think that is what the future of healthcare really needs to look forward to embracing, because I think it will not only save our profession, which is leaving in droves by the bedside, but it will also transform our healthcare system to be more compassionate and really focus on how do we alleviate the suffering that we're seeing in the patients and their outcomes and drive better care in a way that we have yet to actualize and can lead to transformational outcomes in the future.
Rebecca, that's such a powerful summation of the art and science of nursing that you just gave to us, and really speaks to how nurses have a skill set in that nursing process that can translate to and even transcend those applications in the business or operational parts of healthcare, which I think, to your point, has been very under-recognized. What do you think has been the key to your success in innovating and leading?
Oh, goodness, that is a loaded question. And I guess it's so funny to think that there's actual success. And I think the reality is it's come with a lot of failures. I think that my path to success, or where I sit in healthcare today, has been because of a quote that someone shared with me a long time ago, which is, there is only one thing that you can control, which is your mindset. So in the face of all of the no's and all of the rejections, or saying this is impossible, or, you know what, we can't challenge the status quo, Rebecca, or you're just a nurse. It was a belief, fundamentally, something that I felt internally, that I kept thinking, no, we can change this. We can do better. There is such power and knowledge and experience and beauty and compassion and integrity in nursing that we can capture this and we can elevate it and we can find a seat at the table. We can be heard. We can drive innovation forward, and we can find those who are going to champion us forward if we can teach nurses the language of business. If I can translate, I think, I feel, I believe, into the outcomes of financial impact, of operational impact, of strategic initiatives. If I can teach nurses to think beyond how we were taught in nursing school, to stop simply at the problem and that feeling that they have, that they know they could change this if somebody would listen. And I just kept going with it. And when I couldn't find a seat at the conventional tables that existed, I created my own. And that's when we came together and founded SONSIEL, with the idea that if we could find other nurses who walked their lives differently, who believed in a future and a place for them, in a place where they felt heard and appreciated and valued, an ability to drive that care forward, that is how I knew we could do it. And that, I think, is where we've been successful, is surrounding yourself with other like-minded nurses who didn't accept the status quo, who believed that nursing held such an important place, not only in the history of healthcare, but in the future of healthcare. That together we would amplify each other's voices, elevate, make connections, network, and continue conversations that others were scared to have. And because of that, I think that's why we've been successful of moving the needle, and why, I guess, in terms of where I sit now in my career and having opportunities, it was because I didn't let other people define what I thought was possible. And every time I had a no, I just thought, I have to find somebody else who will hear me differently, or how do I change that position so that eventually we can get to a yes? And what I can tell anybody who is listening today and sharing with you, Barbara, and your incredible career, is that it was taking risks constantly, being uncomfortable, and recognizing that it would have been much easier to often stay where I was, but recognizing that if I stayed where I was at that moment of time, I would never accelerate to keep going forward. And that was really hard. But it has been those moments when I've taken that big jump that actually paid off, even though at times it felt like a free fall and a total disaster waiting to happen. It actually paid off.
Yeah, that's amazing. I heard you describe so many themes that I think are common among nurses and nursing leaders. Fear, lack of recognition as a trusted partner at the table, knowledge gaps. And it sounds like you've had some great experience either within yourself or with a trusted group of colleagues in overcoming some of those challenges. I'd love to hear, what do you think is the biggest thing you've had to overcome? And how does SONSIEL help other nurses overcome those same challenges?
My biggest impact to overcome has been classified as just being a nurse. And Barbara, I think a lot of us as nurse leaders talk about this, is how many of us quantify at a point of time that we've considered removing nurse from our title or from our resume or from conversations, because as soon as we're identified as the nurse in the room, our perspectives, almost you can see it on the faces of your colleagues, are devalued or not appreciated. And I think what I had to do was learn how to translate the opinions of nursing into a way that translated to business, in a way that would not be seen as a soft skill, but as a very objectionable hard skill with measurable outcomes that led to the KPIs or OKRs that an organization needed. Although we're the most trusted profession, we have a very poor definition of what nurses do, right? We are so fragmented and are so widely skilled in so many different areas that it's really hard to quantify what we do. And in the void of being able to explain what we do, people assume that the image of a nurse is an empathetic caregiver who holds a patient's hands and thinks and feels and believes in things, but not necessarily has the mindset or the skill set or the knowledge on finance or operations or business skills that can actually move strategic mountains for organizations who would be willing to listen. So SONSIEL, I think what we've done is we've created a collaboration where we connect each other and we champion each other and we support each other and we give them connections and we open up doors and we help them write business plans and organize the way that they go and they raise money or funding or position themselves in a marketplace, because we have to translate that world from empathy into the world of business. One thing that I've really come to value in my current role at IntelyCare is my CEO recognized in the way that we spoke about the environment and the way that I talked to him about healthcare and nursing. He recognized that I was able to translate the world of nursing into the world of business in a way that many of us struggle to do. And that to me is, I think, the biggest hurdle that I've learned to overcome is how to quantify nursing not simply as a cost to healthcare systems, but learning to quantify nursing as a value to healthcare systems, even in the face of, let's be honest, reimbursement models that still quantify them as a cost. But we're learning to translate that differently and move the needle to try to transcend the limitations that have put beyond us because of the reimbursement model in nursing that ties us to room rates and cost structures, and actually start translating how nursing is a value or a revenue generator or an actual important place within the institution of healthcare that can drive OKRs and KPIs for facilities and the greater system of healthcare in its totality.
You know, Rebecca, you get to interact with so many nurses and healthcare professionals in what you do, both for your work and your volunteer work with SONSIEL. And you have such a great grasp of conceptual changes that need to happen, not just in nursing, but in healthcare overall. How do you envision the future of nursing from that conceptual place, and just based on the interactions you get to have with so many nurses in your work?
Oh, that is a great question. I think that the future of healthcare is going to become intrinsic on nursing from a perspective of leadership and direction, because I think as we inherently are going to go into a place where there is a substantial lack of nurses at the bedside, there is going to be a releveling of conversations to try to drive better engagement of nurses to both stay by the bedside, but more importantly, inspire the next generation to become nurses. And I think that the future of healthcare and the future of nursing, it means that we're going to have to look back to our educational structures and really look at how we're teaching nurses. The amount of time that we spend on bed baths and making beds is really an archaic way of looking at our profession. We really need to be training nurses to the business of healthcare. And that means courses in finance and strategy, operations, and organizational structure, and really critical key pieces that are going to give nurses language to be able to communicate and accelerate the growth of the impact nurses can have, and also career paths. Fundamentally, I think we've seen nursing historically, because it's a 100-year-old profession since the 1920s in the United States, largely tied to hospital systems to provide care. I think we're seeing a massive evolution of where this generation wants to sit. Nurses like you and I, who see a position not only starting at the bedside, but really running a health system in our career future. And that means that what we're going to have to do is nurses like you and I are going to have to reach through the cracks and pull up other nurses behind us. But also, we're going to have these hard conversations. We're going to have to push the envelope in places that are not yet ready to hear that a nurse needs to have a seat at the table. And then we're going to have to embrace and find champions of those who operate in healthcare, who have the financial backing because they make money off of selling services into healthcare, to say, you know what, if you don't have a nurse at your table, we're not buying your products, because this product or process or protocol that you're asking us to implement actually creates more work for our nursing workforce, doesn't actually accomplish the outcomes that you hope. And the reason that we're going to be able to do that and save our workforce is because there's going to be a nurse sitting right in the middle of that table saying the fundamental principle is good, but the way you're executing it and just putting it on the shoulders of nursing to do one more thing is not something that's going to lead us to success. So I think the future is either nursing is going to become a less skilled, less desirable profession, leading to a deterioration of healthcare delivery and outcomes for patients across the industry. Or there's going to be more adoption of bringing nurses up and creating leadership channels that are going to bring them into their system to be successful. And I think you're going to see this fragmentation happen across the industry in the coming years. And I think the industries, the private businesses to the public healthcare systems who adopt more nurses into leadership are going to excel in the marketplace, where the others will start to deteriorate.
Having that seat at the table and really being at the helm of healthcare is a pretty exciting one. What's your recommendation for a nurse who wants to start their own business or innovate in healthcare or really pursue having that place at the table?
So I think the first thing for any nurse to do is to volunteer into an event or an experience that they would normally not have accessibility into. And why I say that is the job you do today will often only get you the job you do today. And nurses, I think, don't understand that. They're like, I just am going to work harder at my regular job. I'm just going to do more with what I have, and it's going to lead to that next step. And they can't figure out why nobody ever sees that next skill set. So I would say to them, get outside of nursing and try to volunteer or engage in an event that you normally wouldn't. So go to a healthcare conference that's not just focused on nursing. If you have a problem that you really know you have the solution for, then you need to go to a hackathon. And there's great organizations. We run some at SONSIEL. MIT runs them. Many healthcare systems are starting to run them as well because they recognize the value and you want to do that. And then if you really want to start a business, there are communities for nurses who have gotten out there and done that. It is a process. It's a mindset. It is willing to take risk. And so what I don't want to say to you is run out tomorrow because you have this great idea and spend lots of money starting a business. I would say start getting yourself uncomfortable first. Start risk-taking differently so that you build up the thick skin, as they say, that you're going to need to get out there and start a business, because it's going to take time, energy, and finances and money and all of those things that they need to do it. But the reality is for any nurse right now who's like, I can't start a business, I know I want to in the future, there are ways to engage in the communities and experiences that are going to get you ready to take that step and bet on yourself, because I'll have to tell you, I don't think any person that I've ever known that has truly bet on themselves has ever regretted it. But I can tell you, I think there's a lot more people out there that look back on their life and think to themselves, gosh, I wish I had just taken that opportunity. And that's what we want nurses to get to. I want them to say, carpe diem, seize the day. Today is my day. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to change healthcare because I know that I'm going to do it better than what exists today. And I'm going to be successful doing it.
Such an awesome inspiration and aspiration for our nurse listeners today. Rebecca, I really appreciate you sharing your unique journey with us and your leadership insights. It has been such a pleasure having you.
Barbara, it has been such a great experience talking with you. And I really appreciate that Vizient is having these conversations, because as a workforce and as the state of nursing is today, it is so important that we really start to have really challenging conversations to drive forward the profession and the entire healthcare industry. So thank you.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe to hear more Care to Lead podcasts and send us your comments. Care to Lead is your path to success and is brought to you by the Vizient Nurse Executive Network. I'm Barbara Seymour. Have a great day.